The story begins with an absence. A stone lid slides, dust blooms like gray incense, and where a body should rest, there is only air. Paris whispers around a hollow space, and a man once called a copyist steps out of history by not being there at all. They will tell you he was a minor clerk with good penmanship. They will tell you he was an alchemist who smuggled dawn into metal. They will tell you he lived too long for comfort. None of these are entirely wrong. But the truest thing ever said about Nicolas Flamel is simpler. He learned to read what cannot be written. Years before the grave's silence became a rumor with legs, before scholars traded footnotes like talismans and candle smoke inched up the nave of Saint-Jacques, there was a morning of ordinary light. It was Paris, 1357, an autumn that tasted of iron and pears. Nicolas sat at his desk amid inks that caught the window's thin gold. The room was a ribcage of shelves and vellum. Notes hung from pegs like sleeping birds. He believed, as men of letters often do, that truth wears the garments of grammar. He believed that what you can copy, you can keep. Then the door lifted its latch. The man who entered did not seem aged so much as threaded with years, the way a tapestry is threaded with light. His beard showed winter. His eyes were weatherless. He carried, with the ease of someone returning a lost glove, a narrow coffer bound in black silk. No greeting, only a nod, the faintest rehearsal of a bow, and the gentle laying down of a weight that was not heavy in the hands but dense in the room, like a bell before it sounds. Nicolas unwound the silk. Beneath was wood the color of midnight after rain, worked with a geometry he did not recognize but somehow remembered. The latch answered his curiosity with a click, and the lid opened on the breath of centuries. Inside, a notebook wrapped in red linen, the red of kings or fresh wax. On its cover, a single phrase was pressed in gold, a sentence that would pass through libraries and legend, that would be chiseled onto the lintel of every seeker's inner door, even if the letters themselves were different where they traveled. He did not yet know the sentence. He only knew that the room had changed temperature, the way a chapel changes when someone kneels. He slid the linen aside and saw pages that seemed to drink the light and release it again in another color. The script was not Latin, not Greek, not Hebrew, and yet what moved across those leaves felt older than all three and younger than a child's breath. Lines curled into sigils that refused to sit still. Angles softened when watched and sharpened when ignored. A serpent bit its tail and became more circle than animal. A tree dreamed its roots into its branches. Figures arranged themselves into a grammar of fire. It is fashionable now to call such things hallucinations. But there was nothing feverish in Nicolas's gaze. He did not blink as a man does when he hopes to wake. He looked the way a pilgrim looks before a relic, afraid of being a fool and afraid of not being one. He traced no letters because there were no letters to trace. He traced an intention in the air. He did what he had been trained to do. He set the book aside and copied what he saw into the margin of his own life. For 3 days, and their long parish of hours, he did not sleep. He drank thin broth, forgot it, and drank the forgetting. He listened to the scratch of his quill and realized it was a clock marking a time he was not in. He realized hunger comes in many dialects, and the deepest of them is not spoken by the body. On the 4th night, exhausted minds make honest mouths. Nicolas placed the closed manuscript over his heart, the way a soldier might place a letter there to stop a blade. He did not pray for translation. He did not pray at all. He breathed, and the breath found its way into a small, precise quiet he had never visited. In that quiet, the gold on the cover warmed as if turned in a fire. He felt, not with the nerves, but with that older instrument we forget we own. He felt the book reading him. What he discovered then is the first secret and the last. It is easier to translate a language than to translate a life. Scripture, of any tradition, says as much when it whispers that wisdom goes where it is welcomed. A text is a city. You enter through the gate your temperament can find. Nicholas, who had mistaken the gate for the inscription over it, finally stepped in. History will try to explain what happened next with causes and footnotes. It will point to the monastic schools and the medical faculties, to the Jewish quarter where the Kabbalists debated letters until letters burned, to travelers returning from Fez and Cairo with stories that looked like maps. It will speak correctly of confiscated codices and bonfires fed with parchment in an age nervous about heresy. But at the level where a human being becomes more than his biography, the explanation is simpler. The book was a mirror, and for the first time, Nicholas did not flinch at his reflection. When he opened the manuscript again, in the gray hour before dawn, he understood nothing, so cleanly that understanding had a place to sit. The symbols did not yield meanings, they yielded motions. His eyes moved one way, and his breath followed. His breath moved another, and something in his chest, a warmth, a steadying, answered. He realized the text was less a set of assertions than a choreography. It led him to place his attention where attention becomes flame. It taught his nerves to listen. It taught his thoughts to hold still long enough to be seen through. Outside, the city performed its practical miracles. Bakers dealing sunrise into dough, water carriers leading river into alleys, bells regulating hope. Inside, a man learned to regulate a different bell. When the fear chimed, fear of error, fear of scandal, fear of being ridiculous, he watched the note travel through him until it dissolved. When pride tried to stand on tiptoe, he let it grow tired and sit down. He discovered, as others had in other languages, that what we call spirit is not elsewhere but fully here, hidden under the noise like a lake beneath wind. In time, measured not by candles but by the fatigue leaving his hands, he read one sentence without reading it. Descend and rectify. It did not come as words. It came as a direction of attention, a vector with heat at its point. You might say it asked him to visit the ground of himself and make it straight. He would later find similar instructions in hermetic fragments, in the Desert Father's sayings, in a physician's counsel to first do no harm, turned inward. But it was this book, in this room, that showed him the furnace where rectification happens, the human heart when it is paid attention. There are coffers in stories because there are coffers in us. There are monasteries because there are rooms within rooms in the mind, each with a window you forget until someone unlatches it. Nicholas would, in the years ahead, become the kind of rumor that keeps a city awake. He would become, for admirers, proof, for skeptics, provocation, for the frightened, a comfortable villain. But before all that performance, there was this: a man sitting very still while an invisible instruction took root. What was in the chest beneath the monastery's rubble? A book, yes, but a book is only a body. The soul of it is the way it makes you breathe. The soul of it is how it teaches you to walk differently through a street you thought you knew, how it asks you to lay down your cleverness like a coin you no longer need, how it convinces you, without argument, that the world is made to be transmuted from the inside out. Nicholas closed the manuscript at last and did not feel deprived. He smiled the way a thirsty man smiles at the first hour of rain. He knew exactly one thing, and it was enough to rearrange the furniture of his future. The stone is not found. It is forged, not in a kiln of brick, in the heat that attention makes when it meets love. Outside, the bells took up their work again. Inside, one bell answered and did not stop. If a book can look back at you, What will it see when it finds you sleeping? The first night he dared to sleep after encountering the impossible, Nicholas entered a different classroom, the classroom of his dreams. He had thought the manuscript's symbols were confined to ink and parchment, but now they blazed across the inner screen of his mind, as if the book had slipped beneath his eyelids and was writing itself in light. Every night for 7 nights, a single image returned, precise and unrelenting. A serpent devouring its own tail formed a perfect circle, and in the center of that eternal loop grew a tree whose roots and branches braided into one another until they were indistinguishable. Each attempt to move closer only intensified the fire of the vision. The serpent burned in emerald flame. The tree radiated a light that did not blind, but purified. On the 7th morning, Nicholas woke with more than memory. His palm tingled as if pressed by an unseen brand. When he opened his hand, a faint mark glowed there, the same Ouroboros encircling the same luminous tree. At first he trembled, half believing it was fever or madness. But when Perenelle, his steadfast companion, touched the mark with her gentle fingers, she whispered words that would echo through his life. "This is the seal of eternal renewal. Your soul has been inscribed with an ancient covenant." The mark did not fade. It throbbed with a subtle warmth, a reminder that the dreams were not fantasy, but initiation. And Nicholas understood that the manuscript was not merely guiding his intellect, it was altering his very being. The symbol's voice. The Ouroboros had been drawn by sages from Egypt to China, from alchemical scrolls in Alexandria to Nordic sagas of Jormungandr. It speaks one truth, that within every ending waits a beginning. The serpent consumes itself, not in destruction, but in nourishment, sustaining the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The tree at its center whispered a second truth, that the roots we fear, the traumas, shadows, and ancestral wounds, are the same substance that nourishes our loftiest branches. We cannot grow upward without drinking from the darkness below. The Ouroboros taught Nicholas that spiritual transformation does not come by fleeing death, pain, or shadow, but by digesting them into light. The practice of the circle. In his journals, Nicholas began to describe a nightly practice. Before lying down to sleep, he would imagine a serpent of golden light curling around his body in a protective circle. As he breathed, the serpent consumed his anxieties, resentments, and limiting thoughts. With every inhalation, he was reborn lighter. With every exhalation, the old self died. You may attempt this practice yourself. Picture a circle of radiant light encasing you as you drift toward sleep. Imagine a serpent of fire swallowing all that is stale in your mind, the worries of the day, the habits that cling like lead. Within this circle, see a tree growing at your heart. Let its roots reach deep into the soil of your subconscious, feeding on lessons hidden in pain, while its branches stretch toward the stars of your highest destiny. This ritual, Nicholas discovered, was more than imagination. The mark on his palm would heat whenever he practiced, as though affirming his sincerity. At times, when he placed his hand upon another's chest, the warmth leapt outward, easing grief or illness in ways he could not explain. He began to suspect the mark was not merely symbolic, but functional, a channel through which a higher current could flow, beyond gold and lead. For centuries, alchemists had obsessed over crucibles, retorts, and metals, believing the highest miracle was to turn base matter into gold. Yet here, Nicholas saw the deeper alchemy, to transmute the leaden density of fear into the gold of awakened spirit. The Ouroboros was not a promise of endless survival of flesh, but of consciousness that learns to die in every moment so it may live more truly in the next. A question for the sleeper. And so Nicholas pressed forward, carrying in his hand a seal of light, in his chest a furnace newly awakened, and in his nights a map drawn by fire. Each step deeper into the manuscript was no longer reading, it was remembering. But the symbol left him with a question, one he could not shake. If all things are meant to die and be reborn, what must I allow to die within me so that my truest self may rise? Winter settled upon Paris like a heavy cloak, and the Seine froze in silence while fires sputtered in stone hearths. For Nicholas, however, the true cold was not outside. It lived within, a weight he came to recognize as the most dangerous metal an alchemist could face. It was not iron, nor tin, nor even lead of the earth, but lead of the soul. Each morning he woke with shoulders bowed, as if carrying the grief of centuries. He realized that his own thoughts had become shackles. They whispered with the familiar voices of ancestors, "You are not enough. Poverty is inevitable. God punishes those who dream beyond their station." These phrases echoed like iron chains passed down through bloodlines. Nicholas began to see that the inheritance of fear could be heavier than stone. One evening, while gazing into the embers of his fire, he saw a vision, his father's face staring back from the flames. The man had lived timidly, bound by the terror of want, haunted by judgment. In that instant, Nicholas understood. He had not only inherited his father's features, but also his invisible cage. His prison was not built of walls, but of beliefs. The revelation of inner lead. The manuscript whispered its teaching. True lead is the density of falsehood. It is every thought that insists upon limitation. Nicholas realized that if he was ever to transmute base metal into gold, he must begin not with the crucible on his table, but with the crucible of his mind. The battle was not against matter, but against illusion. Modern seekers may call these illusions limiting beliefs. Psychologists might describe them as patterns etched into neural pathways. Ancient mystics, however, named them demons. Whatever the name, they are heavy, suffocating, and false. And the first work of the alchemist is to recognize them as lead waiting for fire. The fire of transmutation. Nicholas developed a practice that would become the turning point of his inner journey. Whenever a thought of fear or inadequacy appeared, he pictured it as a lump of dull lead resting in the space of his awareness. Then, with a deep breath, he carried that lump into the golden flame he had learned to kindle in his chest. He did not argue with the thought, nor deny it. He offered it. In the furnace of attention, the lump would melt, releasing not smoke, but light. What had once been I cannot became a soft certainty of I am able. What had once been I am unworthy became a remembrance of inherent value. This was no fantasy. Nicholas began to feel his body change. The heaviness in his shoulders lifted. His breath deepened. The eyes of others noticed a brightness in his gaze, as though some hidden lamp had been lit behind them. The discipline of vigilance. True alchemy, he discovered, requires vigilance. Just as a smith must watch his furnace lest the flame falter, so must a seeker observe the mind. Every unexamined thought is a potential weight. Each belief that begins with despair is lead waiting to be fed to fire. You may attempt this practice. When you hear the whisper of doubt, I am too old, too weak, too late. Pause. Place your hand on your heart. Inhale slowly, visualizing a golden flame rising within. Offer the thought into that flame and watch it dissolve. Whisper to yourself, my true nature is pure gold, all else is smoke. The first transmutation. Complete months passed. Nicholas repeated this inner ritual countless times, and one morning, as frost rimed the window glass, he awoke lighter than he had ever been. The chains of ancestry, the inherited fears, had melted. He no longer carried the prison of his father's terrors. Instead, he walked as though a crown of light rested unseen upon his brow. In that moment he grasped the secret. The Philosopher's Stone is not an object of matter. It is the soul's capacity to transform itself, to turn fear into love, darkness into light, lead into gold. And yet a whisper within him asked, "If I can transmute my own shadows, can I also help transmute the sorrows of others?" The turning of the seasons brought more than frost to Nicolas's window. It brought Perenelle. She entered his life not as a footnote, but as a flame that would alter his very alchemy. She was a young widow, her gaze luminous with a wisdom that seemed borrowed from centuries. When she smiled, it was as if the heaviness of the world paused, just long enough for hearts to remember they were meant to be light. Yet what most astonished Nicolas was not her beauty, nor even her presence, but her dreams. Night after night, Perenelle dreamed of rivers of molten gold flowing through landscapes more radiant than sunrise. She spoke of them each morning with poetic clarity. "I see a light that is not metal, but spirit. When it touches the wounded, they rise whole. When it bathes the fearful, they remember courage. When it flows through lovers, they no longer see two bodies, but a single flame." At first, Nicolas dismissed her visions as the aftertaste of grief or imagination. But when she began to sketch the symbols she saw, spirals of light, serpents of fire, trees whose roots coiled into stars, his heart stilled. They were the same symbols the manuscript had shown him, symbols she had never seen with waking eyes. The alchemy of two souls. One moonlit night, Nicolas dared to reach into her dream. Sitting beside her as she slept, he placed a trembling hand upon her brow and let the rhythm of his breath merge with hers. Suddenly, the veil dissolved. He found himself beside her in a temple of gold, an inner sanctuary more brilliant than any cathedral raised in stone. There, the walls themselves pulsed with life, and a single flame stood between them, tall as a pillar, pure as dawn. Together they stepped into the fire. What they experienced was not burning but remembering. They realized in that instant that the gold they sought was not to be created, but uncovered, for every soul is already forged in that light. Life merely covers it with layers of fear, grief, and illusion. When Nicolas woke, Perenelle stirred and whispered, "The truest alchemy is not solitary, it is love." A daily ritual of love's gold. From then onward, they practiced what they called the contemplation of mutual gold. Each morning before sunrise, they sat face to face, their eyes steady as still water. With each breath, they envisioned a river of golden light flowing from heart to heart. Shadows dissolved in that current. Resentments, fears, the small fractures that strain human bonds. In their place grew a recognition. You are divine. I am divine. Together we are one flame. You too can attempt this. Find someone, a partner, a friend, even your own reflection in the mirror. Sit quietly, breathe with attention, and imagine a thread of golden light linking heart to heart. With each inhalation, let it grow thicker until it becomes a river. Whisper inwardly, I see the gold in you. I see the gold in me. We are one in light. Love as the master's stone. It became clear that the Philosopher's Stone is not only the power to transmute within oneself, but to co-create transformation in another. Love, true love, is the most potent alchemical fire. Two souls who see the divine in each other amplify the flame until it radiates outward. Their modest home grew into a sanctuary. Strangers would arrive carrying burdens heavy as iron and depart lighter, shining as if some hidden treasure had been dusted off inside them. The alchemy of Nicolas and Flamel was not in flasks and furnaces, but in presence, in the golden recognition they shared and extended to all who entered their space. A question. Left. Glowing one night, watching Flamel sleep, Nicolas asked himself, if love itself is the true elixir, then what is death but the final test of love's endurance? The manuscript seemed to hold its breath, waiting for him to ask aloud. Death arrived not as an intruder, but as a teacher. Nicolas learned this truth the day his mother exhaled her last breath in his arms. He felt her body grow still, her warmth fade into the stone-cold silence of absence. In that moment, grief threatened to hollow him into nothingness. He believed, as most mortals do, that he had witnessed an ending. For 3 days he mourned, retreating into solitude with the manuscript pressed against his chest. He asked it for answers, but no words appeared, no symbols revealed themselves. Only silence. Yet within that silence, on the 3rd night, he heard her voice. It was not the weak, faltering tone of illness, but the familiar, tender sound of his mother calling him by name. Do not cry for what you think you have lost. I have not died, Nicolas. I have only laid aside a garment too small for my spirit. Her presence enveloped him like a fragrance, intimate, undeniable. He knew then that death is not a wall, but a doorway. The manuscript confirmed what her spirit whispered, that life continues beyond form, and that the soul cannot be extinguished by the crumbling of flesh. Death as transmutation. For Nicolas, this revelation shattered the tyranny of fear. Death was no longer an enemy to resist, but a transformation to embrace. Just as lead melts into gold, the body dissolves into light. What we call dying is merely the alchemy of spirit, the cocoon surrendering so the butterfly may emerge. This teaching is echoed in many traditions. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes the soul navigating trials after death, not to end, but to ascend. In the East, yogis speak of Mahasamadhi, a conscious departure where the body falls but awareness remains. Even in Christian mysticism, saints speak of death as a wedding feast, where the soul unites with eternal life. Nicolas now saw the great deception of fear. Humanity weeps for endings that are actually beginnings. The practice of conscious dying. Determined to understand, he began to practice what he called death in awareness. Each night before sleep, he imagined leaving his body with full consciousness. He visualized a golden cord stretching from his heart to the stars, his awareness rising like a sphere of light along this thread. He whispered to himself, I am more than this body. I am eternal consciousness, exploring beyond form. This exercise changed everything. Sleep became a rehearsal for eternity. Dreams no longer bound him. They guided him. He traveled to landscapes of light, met with souls long past, and received teachings from masters whose names had vanished from earthly memory. Healing through the beyond. One evening, he placed his marked palm over the chest of a dying man. Instead of resisting death, Nicolas whispered encouragement. Do not fear. You are not ending. You are passing into freedom. The man's face relaxed, his breath softened, and when the final exhale came, it carried not terror, but peace. Nicolas realized the greatest gift an alchemist could offer was not the promise of endless bodily life, but liberation from the illusion of death. The door without lock. From then on, he no longer asked, will I survive death? The true question became, how can I live so fully awake that death finds me already alive in eternity? And yet, with this new knowledge burning bright, another mystery stirred. If death is but a passage, what hidden fire still waits within the living heart? The secret furnace that transforms even before the final breath. Years of seeking had led Nicolas across Europe, into monasteries, smithies, and secret chambers, searching for the perfect furnace. He believed, like every alchemist before him, that if he could build the right vessel, he would unlock the great transmutation. Clay shattered, metal cracked, rare stones absorbed his fortune, and still, nothing worked. One stormy night, lightning carved the sky, illuminating a laboratory littered with broken crucibles. Nicolas sat among the ruins of his failures, shoulders bent, patience dissolved. He closed his eyes, not in prayer, but in surrender, and in that abyss of silence he heard it, a faint crackle inside his own chest, as though a flame long ignored had been waiting. Startled, he placed his hands over his heart. Warmth surged beneath his palms, not the heat of fever but of something eternal. In that instant, he knew. The true furnace was never outside. It had always burned within, mapping the inner furnace. In the months that followed, Nicolas explored this inner fire with the devotion of a mystic and the precision of a scientist. He found it had chambers. In the solar plexus, a lower fire that consumed dense emotions, anger, grief, fear. In the heart center, a steady blaze that purified thoughts into wisdom. At the throat, a higher flame that shaped words into living power. By breathing with awareness, he could stoke these fires. By focusing intention, he could direct their heat. The manuscript's cryptic words now unfolded like a living diagram. The alchemist's oven was not made of stone, but of flesh infused with spirit. Practice of the golden breath. He and Perenelle developed a discipline they named the golden breath. Sitting back to back, they breathed in perfect rhythm. With each inhalation, they envisioned a golden flame rising in their hearts. With each exhalation, the fire spread, burning away impurities. The results astonished them. After an hour, their bodies radiated a tangible heat, and visitors to their home reported feelings of deep peace and healing simply by being near. With each practice, the inner fire grew steadier, stronger, until it seemed to answer not only their needs, but the needs of those around them. Miracles of the silent furnace. In time, they discovered the furnace could ripple into the world. Lead objects placed near their bodies shimmered faintly with golden streaks. Wilted plants revived. The sick found comfort in Nicolas's touch, not because of medicine, but because the fire within him burned away the heaviness that clung to their souls. This was no trick of chemistry. It was the true magnum opus, to awaken the divine fire every human carries, and to tend it until it burns so brightly that even the world outside is warmed. The alchemist's realization. The silent furnace of the soul became Nicolas's greatest revelation. The philosopher's stone was not forged in alembics and retorts, but in the heart of one who dares to recognize their own eternal flame. Yet even this discovery left him restless. For if the fire within could purify, if it could heal, then what was the nature of the stone itself? Was it truly a mineral waiting to be found? Or was it something more elusive, hidden in plain sight? For 15 years, Nicolas wandered beneath vaulted skies and through shadowed crypts, searching for the legendary philosopher's stone, as though it were some jewel misplaced in the world. He bargained with merchants who promised secrets, studied maps inked with deceptive stars, and spent fortunes on crystals, meteors, and sacred stones. Yet every object remained mute. Every experiment ended with the bitter taste of futility. On the eve of his 45th birthday, exhausted and disillusioned, he sat by a window in the dead of night. The full moon's reflection shimmered on the glass, and within that reflection he saw a face that was both his own and not his own. It radiated a light so pure, so golden that it pierced his despair. He whispered, trembling, "Who are you?" The answer did not arrive as sound, but as knowing. I am the stone you have sought, not outside, but within. I am your essence made visible. I am consciousness crystallized into gold. The revelation of the true stone. The realization struck with such clarity that it dissolved decades of searching. The stone was never a mineral hidden in mountains, nor a relic guarded in temples. It was awareness itself, polished by discipline, shining through the heart when freed of illusion. This truth echoed wisdom long preserved across traditions. In Buddhism, the Buddha nature, the golden seed within all beings. In Christian mysticism, the Imago Dei, the divine image hidden in the soul. In Taoist alchemy, the inner cinnabar field, a radiant center of immortality. Every culture had named the stone, and every seeker had overlooked it while looking outward. The mirror of gold. Determined to embody this discovery, Nicolas devised a daily meditation he called the Golden Mirror. At dawn, he would sit before a polished surface, gazing not at the body's features but at the light behind the eyes. With patience, his reflection blurred, and a subtle radiance emerged, a glow not of flesh but of essence. Over weeks and months, this radiance grew until it felt as tangible as touch. When he breathed into it, despair dissolved. When he spoke from it, words carried a gravity that moved hearts. The mirror was no longer glass. It was a portal to the stone within. A practice for the seeker. You too may attempt this. Sit quietly with a mirror. Breathe deeply, soften your gaze, and look not at the surface but into the silent space behind your eyes. Wait. In time, a subtle glow will stir, a light that is not from the lamp, but from the soul. That glow is your stone. Greet it, breathe with it, let it expand until it fills the room. The power of recognition. Nicolas discovered that when he remained anchored in this inner stone, his mere presence could shift others. People burdened by sorrow left his company lighter, as if some golden essence had awakened in them as well. He realized that the philosopher's stone is contagious. When one flame remembers itself, it sparks remembrance in all who draw near. And yet the manuscript urged him onward. For if the stone was consciousness, what then was the power of the word, the voice shaped by that golden awareness? Could speech itself become an alchemical tool? The discovery came not in triumph, but in frustration. Nicolas had been laboring for weeks over a stubborn bar of lead, applying heat, tinctures, and secret salts, yet the metal refused to yield. One night, exhausted and defeated, he slammed his tools onto the bench. The bar rolled from the table, clattering across the stone floor like a cruel echo of his failure. From the pit of his despair rose a cry, not of reasoned prayer, but of raw authority. His voice thundered through the chamber, "By the powers of heaven and earth, be gold now!" The words vibrated with a force beyond his own strength, as if another presence had borrowed his tongue. In the stunned silence that followed, Nicolas saw the impossible. The bar of lead shimmered, faintly at first, then pulsing with golden veins until its surface gleamed like the sun itself. He fell to his knees. The transformation had not come from fire, acid, or formula. It had come from the spoken word, charged with intention, rooted in the awakened stone within him. The power of Logos. Nicolas realized what mystics of many ages had whispered: the word is not merely sound, it is creation. In the beginning was the word, the gospel proclaimed. The Egyptian priests spoke of Hu, the voice of authority that shaped cosmos. In India, sages had chanted Om, the primal vibration of all reality. Now Nicolas had tasted the same truth. Language, when spoken from awakened consciousness, is alchemy, the practice of the golden word. With Perenelle as his companion, Nicolas began experimenting. They would spend an hour in silent preparation, breathing, aligning their hearts, awakening the furnace within. Only then would they speak. Words uttered in this state carried weight. Let there be peace. Let there be light. And often peace and light would indeed ripple into the room, felt by all present. They discovered that tone mattered less than the state of awareness behind it. Ordinary speech, born of ego or fear, fell lifeless to the ground. But words spoken from the awakened stone, from the furnace of the heart, resonated as if reality itself bent to listen. A lesson for the seeker. You may try this. Before speaking an important word, whether of blessing, promise, or prayer, pause. Enter the silence between thoughts. Feel the golden fire within your chest. Then speak, not as a beggar asking, but as a creator declaring. Whisper to yourself, I am health, I am light, I am love. Notice how the words vibrate differently, how they carve new space in the air. Beyond metal and flesh, the bar of lead transformed that night became a relic, a sign that the old obsession of alchemy, changing base metal into gold, was only a shadow of the deeper truth. The real transformation was not in objects, but in lives. Nicolas saw that words, spoken from awakened being, could heal, reconcile, and awaken others to their hidden gold. Still, the manuscript pressed further. If the stone could shine through the word, could it also shine through something subtler, something even more intimate? Nicolas would soon learn that the greatest elixir was not hidden in crucibles or syllables, but in the deepest movement of the heart. For years, Nicolas had heard whispers of a legendary potion, the Elixir of Life. A single drop, alchemists claimed, could heal any illness, halt aging, even grant immortality. He had searched libraries, bartered in marketplaces, and risked fortunes on rare herbs and celestial alignments. Yet every liquid he distilled was nothing more than flavored water, fragile, powerless, disappointing. The true revelation came not in his laboratory, but at Perenelle's bedside. She had fallen gravely ill, her body burning with a fever no physician could explain. For 3 days Nicolas sat vigil, his soul consumed by helplessness. He tried every tincture, every formula, but none cooled her fire. By the dawn of the 4th day, despair had hollowed him, and he believed he would lose her. Then, without effort, something broke open within him. From the core of his chest surged a wave of love so pure it dissolved every fear, every calculation. It was not the clinging love of desperation, but a love vast as the cosmos, tender as dawn. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sorrow but of boundless compassion. One drop fell upon Perenelle's lips. She stirred, exhaled, and opened her eyes. Her fever faded as though drawn into the unseen river of his love. Her face regained its color. Her breath steadied. In that moment, Nicolas realized the true elixir wasn't a liquid brewed in alembics. It was a secretion of the heart when it expands beyond itself into unconditional love. The alchemy of tears. In the months that followed, Nicolas studied his own heart with the diligence of a chemist. He found that not all tears held the same essence. Tears of self-pity were bitter, weak. Tears of ordinary grief carried weight, but no transformation. Yet tears born of pure compassion, tears for life itself, were radiant, golden, alive. These contained the true elixir, capable of renewal not only for the body but for the soul. This truth echoes in ancient traditions. In Hindu lore, the gods churned the cosmic ocean to draw forth Amrita, the nectar of immortality. In Christian mysticism, saints spoke of the gift of tears as a baptism of the heart. Science today speaks of oxytocin and endorphins released in deep states of love and empathy, chemical signatures of a timeless secret. A practice of the heart's distillation. To touch this elixir, Nicolas developed what he called the distillation of the open heart. He would sit in silence, breathe deeply, and cultivate gratitude. Gratitude for breath, for the chance to love, for the miracle of existence. As the gratitude swelled, love would rise like a tide until tears formed naturally. Each tear felt not personal, but universal, a drop distilled from the ocean of creation. You may try this. Place your hands on your chest, breathe slowly, and call to mind someone you love. Then expand that love, first to your family, then to strangers, then to every being suffering in the world. Let your heart grow until it can contain all. If tears come, do not hold them back. Each drop is a spark of the elixir, a reminder that immortality is the fragrance of unconditional love. Renewal through love. Nicolas noticed something extraordinary. With every practice, his body seemed to renew itself. Lines of age softened. Strength returned. Those who visited him spoke of feeling lighter, healthier, simply by being near. When he and Perenelle practiced together, the atmosphere around them thickened with a warmth that healed even unspoken wounds. Toward the temple within, the elixir had revealed itself not as a substance to hoard, but as a vibration to share. Yet still the manuscript beckoned. If the heart could distill nectar, then where was the ultimate sanctuary that housed all these mysteries, the temple of which every vision, every practice was only a doorway? Nicolas spent decades chasing the rumor of a temple said to guard the highest mysteries of alchemy. He pored over cryptic maps, bribed librarians, followed faint whispers across mountains and rivers. He descended into catacombs, wandered abandoned monasteries, even traced pilgrim paths through icy northern lands. Always he found fragments, symbols carved into stone, parchments hinting at forgotten rites, but never the door itself. The pursuit became an obsession. Each journey ended in frustration. Every locked gate mocked him with silence. At last, weary and disillusioned, he confessed to Perenelle his despair. With the serene wisdom of one who sees beyond, she asked a question so simple it struck him like thunder. What if the temple you seek is not in the world, but within you? At first, her words angered him. Could she belittle the sacrifices, the years of endless searching? But the seed of possibility had been planted. And one night, when insomnia stripped him bare, the seed split open. The temple revealed. He sat by his dying hearth, staring into the last embers. Then, without warning, the walls of his chamber dissolved. The ceiling melted into stars. Around him rose columns of crystalline light, vast and trembling, stretching into infinity. He found himself in a cathedral of radiance, a temple without walls, without doors, and yet more real than stone. At the center was not an altar, but a presence, immense, luminous, tender. Its silence was louder than thunder, its embrace vaster than oceans. Nicolas felt himself dissolve into it, like a drop returning to the sea. No questions remained, for the answers had always been written into his being. The protocol of the doorless temple. In the months that followed, Nicolas described a method to enter this sanctuary, a practice for the seeker. You may attempt it. Sit where you will not be disturbed. Close your eyes and breathe until the body grows light. Imagine the space around you expanding endlessly, the walls dissolving into transparency. See yourself seated in a vast cathedral of light. In its center, feel a presence waiting. Step forward, not with feet, but with awareness, and allow yourself to merge into that infinite love. The realization. Nicolas understood then that all his outer searches, books, maps, stones, were but preparations for this one revelation. The most sacred temple is the consciousness itself. No door needs unlocking, for it was never locked. We have always lived within it, blinded only by the illusion of separation. And yet, even as this truth reshaped his being, the manuscript whispered of one last veil to pierce. If the temple has no door, then what of death itself? Is it a decree unchangeable, or a choice the soul can consciously make? On the morning of his 60th birthday, Nicholas gazed into the mirror and felt the weight of time staring back. Fine lines webbed around his eyes, silver threaded his hair, and fatigue pressed against his bones. For decades he had practiced transmutations of the heart, distillations of love, entrances into the inner temple, and yet his body whispered of decay. The question haunted him: was death inevitable, or merely a belief repeated so long it hardened into law? That evening, he withdrew to his innermost chamber, not the laboratory of glass and fire, but the sanctuary where only silence answered. Surrounded by relics of his journey, the manuscript, worn with use, his journals, the fragments of gold-streaked lead, he dared to voice the most audacious question of his life. Must I die, or can the soul choose to remain? The revelation of the soul's contract. In deep stillness, the answer arrived, not as thunder, but as a quiet certainty that resounded through every cell. Death, he understood, was not a decree imposed from without, but a contract written within. Each soul, before birth, inscribes the lessons it will learn, the love it will give, the gifts it will weave into the tapestry of humanity. When the soul feels its purpose is complete, it signals the body to decline, to return home. But the contract, Nicholas discovered, could be renewed. The soul could say, I am not finished. I choose to remain, to expand my service, to deepen my love. When such a declaration was made with full awareness, the body obeyed, regenerating as if time itself bent to the decision. The practice of renewal. Each year thereafter, on his birthday, Nicholas entered communion with his soul. He would sit in meditation, breathe deeply, and ask, what is my expanded purpose for the year to come? The answers surfaced as images, impulses, tasks unfinished. He would then declare aloud, I consciously renew my contract of life. I remain in this body until my work is fulfilled. I instruct every cell to awaken to vitality, to align with my soul's will. With each renewal, vitality surged through him. His skin regained luster, his mind sharpened, his energy multiplied. Time no longer chased him. He walked beside it as an equal. Orwell's double flame. When Perenelle joined him in this practice, something remarkable occurred. Their combined intention created a field so vibrant that visitors to their home reported leaving refreshed, youthful, as though bathed in invisible light. Together they demonstrated that immortality was not a selfish defiance of death, but a service, a conscious decision to remain as long as love required. The challenge to every seeker. Nicholas no longer asked, how many years will I live? Instead he asked, how fully will I live in each moment? He saw that immortality begins not with endless calendars, but with the courage to dissolve fear of death and embrace the responsibility of being eternal now. Yet one mystery remained. If the contract of life could be renewed, what was the final purpose of all this alchemy? Was it endless survival, or something greater, the unveiling of the soul's true gold? At last the years of seeking, burning, and transmuting drew Nicholas to the most startling revelation of all. One winter night, a spark from his hearth leapt onto the parchment strewn across his desk. In moments, fire engulfed the laboratory that had been his sanctuary for half a century. He tried to save what he could, but the blaze devoured everything. Scrolls, instruments, and precious substances turned to smoke. For a moment, grief crushed him. Decades of work reduced to ash. Yet as he stood among the ruins, the fire outside seemed to awaken a fire inside. He felt a strange liberation, as if the manuscript and the crucibles had only ever been scaffolding for a cathedral that already stood within. Perenelle approached through the smoke, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and wisdom. She placed her hand upon his chest and said softly, "Now you are free. You do not need to create gold, for you are gold. You do not need to seek immortality, for you are eternal." The final alchemy. Nicolas realized then that the great work was never about changing matter, but about unveiling what had always been true. The fire had not destroyed his treasure, it had revealed it. The laboratory was not brick and mortar, but the human heart. The furnace was not clay, but love. The philosopher's stone wasn't hidden in mines or manuscripts, but in the soul remembering itself. The true alchemist does not turn metal into gold. He burns away illusion until only the gold of spirit remains. The practice of the eternal flame. From that day forward, Nicolas cultivated what he called the perpetual fire. Each morning, before any thought or duty, he lit the flame within his chest through breath and awareness. Every fear, insult, or sorrow that arose during the day he cast into this inner fire. There, all was consumed and transmuted into wisdom and compassion. You may attempt this yourself. Upon waking, close your eyes and imagine a flame within your heart that requires no fuel, for it burns with the infinite love of the universe. Throughout the day, whenever darkness appears, anger, fear, doubt, offer it to the flame. Watch it dissolve into light. Before sleep, give thanks to the fire for transmuting every moment into gold. The gift to the future. As Nicolas wrote his final words, he knew his legacy was not formulas or elixirs, but a reminder. We are already what we seek. We are the gold hidden beneath layers of fear. We are the stone waiting to be remembered. We are the fire, eternal and unquenchable. His manuscript closes with a benediction. Cease searching outside for what only lives within. Stop striving to become what you already are. Let the fire in your heart consume every shadow until only light remains. You are the alchemist, and you are the gold. And with those words, the lost manuscript of Nicolas Flamel ends. Not as a conclusion, but as a flame passed from his heart into ours.